don't belong in that chair." He did not say it quietly. He said it in front of 11 other people seated around a conference table on the 14th floor of the Hargrove and Slade building in downtown Atlanta. And he said it the way men like him always say things they know they can get away with. Not as a threat, not as a question, just as a fact he was helpfully pointing out. The woman in the chair did not flinch. She set down her pen. She looked at him. And every single person in that room was about to understand exactly how wrong he was. To understand what happened in that boardroom, you need to understand the room itself. The Hargrove and Slade Arbitration Center was not just a building. It was a 40-year institution, the kind of place whose name appeared on the short list before any other name was suggested. Corporate disputes, patent conflicts, employment law. If a company had something to lose and wanted to lose it quietly, they came here. The center had resolved over $3 billion in commercial claims in the past decade alone. The walls carried the portraits of its senior arbitrators in carved mahogany frames. Every portrait was of a white man, every single one. The man who had spoken was Harlan Pruitt, 63 years old, senior partner, founding family of the firm's predecessor entity, and the reason the waiting room on the 4th floor still had leather chairs that smelled like 1987. He had been arbitrating commercial disputes for 31 years. He had never lost a case he chose to take. He reminded people of this regularly. Harlan Pruitt did not see himself as a difficult man. He saw himself as a precise one. The woman across from him was Delia Okonkwo, 54 years old, former federal judge, United States District Court for the Northern District of Georgia. Retired from the bench after 19 years, she had presided over 712 cases. Her written opinions had been cited in federal appellate decisions 43 times. She held a law degree from Yale and a master's in economics from the London School of Economics that most people never knew about because she did not lead with credentials the way certain men in certain rooms always seemed to need to. She had not come to the Hargrove and Slade Center to audition. She had been retained as the neutral arbitrator in the matter of Castellan Group versus Meridian Fiber Technologies, a 9-figure dispute involving breach of a supply agreement and allegations of trade secret misappropriation. She had been recommended by the American Arbitration Association, vetted by both parties' counsel, confirmed in writing 3 weeks prior. She had arrived 12 minutes early. She had read the full case record over the preceding weekend. She had organized her notes in a leather portfolio that she had owned since her 2nd year on the bench. Harlan Pruitt had arrived 4 minutes late and immediately assumed she was someone's paralegal. He had asked her, in front of both legal teams and their clients, whether she could bring in more water. Then he had looked at her name card. Then he had said it. "You don't belong in that chair." He smiled when he said it. The smile of a man who believes the room is on his side. Some of the people in that room looked at their hands. One junior associate near the door found something urgently interesting on her notepad. The lead counsel for Castellan, a man named Douglas Fenn, cleared his throat and looked at the ceiling. The lead counsel for Meridian, a woman named Patricia Shua, had stopped breathing entirely. One person did not look away. A young associate named Tiara Moss, sitting against the wall behind Patricia Shu's chair, looked at Delia Okonkwo with the expression of someone watching a match being held near a fuse. She had seen Okonkwo's name on the arbitrator disclosure form 3 weeks ago, and had quietly read every opinion the woman had ever published. She knew what was in that chair. She gripped her pen and waited. Delia did not raise her voice. She did not reach for her credentials. She did not explain herself, clarify her appointment, or invite Harlan Pruitt to reconsider. She picked up her pen and opened her portfolio and said, "Let's begin." That was it. 2 words, but the way she said them made it clear that she had already decided the only thing that mattered. The proceeding was going to happen. It was going to happen correctly, and Harlan Pruitt's opinion of her seating arrangement was not a variable in that equation. Pruitt's jaw tightened by a fraction. He looked at Douglas Fenn. Fenn looked at the table. The room began. To understand Delia Okonkwo, you need to understand where she started, which was not where people assumed when they saw her in a room like this one. She had grown up in Decatur, Georgia. Her mother, Frances Okonkwo, had worked 30 years as a postal carrier. Her father had died when Delia was 11, and after that it was Frances and Delia and her younger brother in a two-bedroom house with a carport and a fig tree in the backyard that her father had planted the year she was born. The tree was still there. Delia had checked last Thanksgiving. She had not gone to a prep school. She had gone to McNair High School, where the library had 3 broken computers and a guidance counselor who handled 400 students and tried very hard with the time she had. Delia had found the law in a paperback book she pulled from a box at a church rummage sale when she was 15. A casebook, second edition. Pages soft with age. She had read it cover to cover in 4 days. She applied to 11 colleges. She was accepted to 3. She chose the one that gave her the most financial aid. She worked 20 hours a week through undergrad. She got into Yale on her second application. She graduated in the top 7% of her class, clerked for a circuit judge in the 11th Circuit, and spent 6 years in private practice before being nominated to the federal bench at 35. She had never belonged anywhere she walked into for the first time. She had walked in any way she walked into for the first time. Every time. When she retired from the bench at 52, she had not been looking for recognition. She had been looking for work that still meant something. Commercial arbitration was not glamorous. Most people did not understand what it was. But the cases were real. The money was real. The harm was real. And someone had to sit in the chair and get it right. She was good at getting it right. She would take in the Castellan case because it was complicated. And she was drawn to complicated things the way some people are drawn to easy ones. What she had not accounted for was Harlan Pruitt. He was not a party to the case. He was not counsel. He was, on paper, simply the managing partner of the center that was hosting the proceeding, which meant he had no standing to speak during the session at all. He had inserted himself into the room on the first morning under the pretense of welcoming the parties, and then he had stayed. His behavior in the hours that followed was not loud. It was architectural, the kind of obstruction built so carefully into the structure of a room that you could not point to any single brick and call it intentional. He interrupted Delia's opening procedural remarks twice to offer clarifications that were not corrections, just reframings of her words in his own voice. He directed post-session questions from the junior associates to himself rather than to her. During the mid-morning break, he told Douglas Fenn in the hallway and in a voice that carried, "This is a significant matter. You want someone with the right kind of experience in the chair." Fenn did not respond, but he did not correct it either. Tiara Moss heard it from 6 feet away. She wrote it down verbatim in her notepad. Date, time, witnesses present. She did not know yet why she was writing it down. She just knew that what she was watching was not normal, and that normal was what people called things when they did not want to say what they actually were. The afternoon session was where it shifted. The core of the Castellan dispute involved a supply agreement that had been modified twice to what Meridian's counsel called informal amendments, emails and internal memos that Meridian claimed constituted binding modifications. Castellan's position was that the modifications were unenforceable because they had not been executed according to the amendment procedure in the original contract. It was a clean question of contract interpretation on the surface. Underneath it was messier. One of the emails at the center of the dispute had a timestamp discrepancy, a metadata anomaly. The email appeared in 2 different document productions with different header timestamps on the same message. Both legal teams had experts. Both experts had been deposed. Both depositions had produced conflicting conclusions. Neither party had flagged the discrepancy directly in their briefing, but Delia had found it on a Sunday afternoon in her home office, cross-referencing the production indexes against the deposition exhibits. She raised it during the afternoon session. She asked both parties' counsel to address the metadata discrepancy in Exhibit 47C. She asked them calmly and specifically, citing the exact exhibit number and the exact timestamp difference between the 2 productions. Douglas Fenn went still. Patricia Shue's hand moved to her notepad, and Harlan Pruitt, sitting off to the side in a chair he had no procedural right to occupy, leaned forward and said, "I believe counsel has already addressed the chain of custody issue in Section 4 of the supplemental brief." He had not read the supplemental brief. That was clear from the sentence itself. Section 4 of Meridian Supplemental Brief addressed chain of custody for physical samples, not digital document production. The metadata discrepancy was not mentioned anywhere in the brief. It had not been addressed by either party. That was precisely why Delia had raised it. She looked at Pruitt. Her expression did not change. She turned back to counsel and repeated the question. This time, no one interrupted. Fenn requested a brief recess. Patricia Hsu agreed. The parties stepped out. The room emptied except for Delia, Tiara Moss, who had not moved, and Harlan Pruitt, who was still in his chair with the expression of a man waiting for a situation to resolve itself in his favor. Delia looked at him. She said, "Mr. Pruitt, you are not counsel in this matter and you are not a party. If you are going to remain in this room during the proceeding, you will need to do so silently and without interruption. If that is not something you are able to do, I will need to ask you to step out. Not loud, not combative." The same tone she had used from the bench for 19 years when she needed to be clearly understood. Pruitt blinked. His face moved through several expressions quickly. Surprise, irritation, the recalculation of a man who had suddenly noticed that the chair he was dealing with was not as uncertain of itself as he had assumed. He stood. He straightened his jacket. He left the room without a word. The door closed. Tiara Moss let out a breath she had apparently been holding for the better part of an hour. Then she looked at Delia, who was already reading back through her notes, and said nothing. Because there was nothing to add. When the parties returned, the session resumed. Ben's team took 2 days to produce a corrected explanation for the timestamp discrepancy. The explanation required retaining a second forensic expert. The second expert's report contradicted the first expert's deposition in 3 material respects. Delia noted all 3 in her procedural record without editorializing. She did not need to editorialize. The record spoke. What was happening in the building outside the session room was a different story. Pruitt had not gone quietly. He had gone directly to the 2 members of the center's oversight committee who owed him the most. He made calls. He suggested to people who would listen that the arbitrator on the Castellan matter was out of her depth, that she was creating procedural complications where none existed, that perhaps the party should be encouraged to consider whether a change of arbitrator was in everyone's interest. One committee member passed this along to Douglas Fenn, who was apparently expected to be receptive. Fenn was not receptive. He had spent the better part of 2 days helping his client explain an email timestamp that should not have existed. He was beginning to suspect that the arbitrator in the Castellan matter was not the problem in this proceeding. The other committee member, a retired appellate judge named Seward Obi, who had known Delia Okonkwo since she clerked for his colleague in 1997, called her directly. He told her what Pruitt was doing. He told her she had options. She could file a formal complaint with the center. She could contact the AAA. She could withdraw from the matter entirely. She listened. She thanked him. She said, "I am going to finish the case." There was a pause on his end. Then he said, "I know. I just wanted you to know what was happening behind you." What Pruitt did not know, what he had not thought to check, because men like Harlan Pruitt rarely think to check what they cannot see, was that Tiara Moss had been writing everything down since day one, not in a general way, specifically, time, witness, exact words. Every interruption during the session, the hallway comment to Douglas Fenn, the calls to the committee members, which she had learned about through the same informal network of junior associates and paralegals that exists at every large firm and that senior partners universally underestimate. She had also pulled the center's arbitrator assignment records for the past 4 years, 31 commercial arbitration proceedings, 31 arbitrators named in those proceedings. 31 arbitrators named in those proceedings. 30 were men. 27 were white. Delia Okonkwo was the second woman ever appointed to a matter at the Hargrove and Slade Center. The first had withdrawn from her proceeding after what the official record described as scheduling conflicts. Tiara was 26 years old. She had been out of law school for 14 months. She did not have Delia Okonkwo's experience, her credentials, or her 19 years on the federal bench. But she had a notepad with 41 entries, a spreadsheet with arbitrator assignment data going back to 2019, and the complete conviction that what she was looking at was not an accident. She put together a memo, 11 pages. She sent it to Patricia Shua on a Thursday evening. Shu read it that night. She called Fen on Friday morning. The two lead counsels on opposite sides of a nine-figure dispute had the first conversation in the proceeding where neither of them was adversarial. The following Monday, both parties jointly submitted a written request to the Oversight Committee. They were asking that the Castellan proceeding be completed under its current arbitrator without further interference from center administration. They attached Tiara's memo as an exhibit. They also asked for a formal review of the center's arbitrator selection practices over the preceding 5 years. The committee chair was not Pruitt. The committee chair was a woman named Valerie Sato, who had been appointed to her position 8 months earlier and had spent most of those 8 months navigating the particular texture of institutional resistance that comes when an institution is not used to being chaired by the kind of person she was. She called an emergency session. Pruitt was invited to attend. He came in with the confidence of a man who had been attending these meetings for 20 years and had never once left one diminished. He left this one diminished. The memo was entered into the committee record. The assignment data was entered into the committee record. The testimony from two junior associates who had been present for the hallway comment was entered into the committee record. Pruitt said that Tiara Moss was a junior associate with 14 months of experience and that her memo represented a fundamental misunderstanding of how arbitration centers operated. Valerie Sato asked him to address the assignment data specifically. He said the data reflected natural market patterns in commercial arbitration. She asked him to explain which natural market patterns, specifically, would account for the fact that no arbitrator of color had ever been assigned a matter at the center. He did not explain it. He said he would need to review the underlying methodology. The review of the methodology took 3 weeks. During those 3 weeks, the Castellan proceeding continued without interruption. Delia ran her sessions the same way she had run every session since day one, methodical, precise, nothing ornamental. She issued her final award on a Wednesday afternoon, 47 pages. She found in favor of Meridian on the main breach of contract claim. She found in favor of Castellan on the trade secret allegations. She ordered a damages calculation methodology that split the liability in a proportion that neither party had fully anticipated, but that both parties' counsel would later, independently, describe as correct. She also included, in a footnote that was technically optional but which she wrote with very specific intention, a notation that the email timestamp discrepancy in Exhibit 47C had never been satisfactorily explained by either party's forensic expert, and that the record of this proceeding preserved the anomaly for any future proceedings that might find it relevant. She was not making an accusation. She was doing what judges do when they want something in the record. She had been doing it for 19 years. Douglas Fenn read the award in his office on a Wednesday evening. He read the footnote twice. Then he called his client and said there was a part of the award they needed to talk about. The Hargrove and Slade Center did not fire Harlan Pruitt. Institutions like that do not fire people like Harlan Pruitt. What they do is restructure. His title remained, his office remained, his name remained on the letterhead because his family's money remained in the endowment. But 3 months after the Castellan Award, the center announced the formation of an independent arbitrator selection panel. The panel would operate without input from senior partners. Appointment decisions would be documented and subject to annual review by the Oversight Committee. Valerie Sato announced it. Her name was on the press release. Pruitt's was not. Tiara Moss found out about the announcement from a colleague who forwarded her the press release at 7:15 in the morning. She was on the train. She read it twice. She sent it to no one. She put her phone in her bag and looked out the window for a while. She had not done it for a press release. She had done it because she had been in that room on the first day, and she had watched what happened, and she had thought, someone needs to write this down. The last time Delia Okonkwo walked into the Hargrove and Slade building, she was there for a new matter. Different parties, different dispute, same chair. The portraits on the wall were the same. All the carved mahogany frames, all the white men going back 40 years. Nobody had taken them down. Nobody was going to take them down any time soon. She walked past them the way she walked past most things that had decided she was not worth noticing. Steadily, without breaking stride. Harlan Pruitt passed her in the lobby. He did not stop. He nodded, the tight performative nod of a man who had calculated that acknowledgement cost less than avoidance. She did not nod back, not out of hostility. She simply did not see him, or chose not to, which amounted to the same thing. She took the elevator to the 14th floor. She sat down at the head of the table. She opened her portfolio. She uncapped her pen. She had read the case file over the weekend. She had found two things in the discovery record that neither party had flagged. She had written her questions in the margins of her notes in handwriting so small and precise it barely fit between the lines. The attorneys filed in. The clients took their seats. Everyone looked at the woman at the head of the table. She looked back, the way she always looked back. Without apology, without papology, without performance, without any particular need for the room to understand what it was dealing with before it found out on its own. She said, "Let's begin."